Imagine standing just 10 meters away from a future that could redefine the geopolitics of Europe. This is the scene unfolding on the border between Poland and Belarus. In the dead of night, while most were asleep, barbed wire was unrolled, steel barriers were raised, and concrete blocks known as dragon's teeth sealed the path. What until yesterday was a transit zone has now become the symbol of a new isolation. Welcome to Tellnomics, the channel that connects numbers to power and reveals how political decisions shape the destiny of entire nations. Today you will understand why the closure of this border is not merely a question of security, but a sign of something much larger. Stay until the end, because what may look like a physical blockade could in fact be the birth of a new invisible wall rising in the heart of Europe. According to official data from the European Border and Coast Guard Agency, known as Frontex, in the year 2021 alone, more than 8,000 migrants were used by Belarus as a tool of pressure against Poland and Lithuania, an episode Brussels classified as hybrid warfare. Now, with the definitive barrier erected in September 2025, what is at stake is not just migration control, but the very redefinition of Europe's security map. What once was a space of contained tensions is today transforming into a zone of rupture. The picture is almost surreal. Duty-free shops open but without customers, customs offices with open doors but no travelers, and border guards paid to patrol a space where no one crosses anymore. All of this costs millions in taxpayer money, while outside, the perception grows that Minsk is sealing itself off, increasingly resembling North Korea. But the pressing question remains, is this isolation merely a reaction to external pressures, or is it the symptom of a dictatorship running out of allies? Belarusian authorities insist this situation is only temporary, that soon everything will return to normal. But the facts point in the opposite direction. In February 2022, when Moscow assured the world its military drills were merely defensive exercises, the outcome was a full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Today, with new barriers rising, who can guarantee that history is not on the verge of repeating itself? And so, just a few meters away, what once seemed like nothing more than another line on a map has turned into a symbol heavy with tension. The world watches, but the greater question is this: are we looking at a simple temporary blockade or the birth of a new Iron Curtain? The answer may be much closer than we think. Have you ever considered what it means to live surrounded by invisible walls? For many Belarusian citizens, this is no longer a metaphor but a tangible reality. With borders sealed, daily life becomes an open-air prison. Imagine being unable to cross to buy medicine, visit relatives, or simply search for better opportunities. According to World Bank data, more than 40% of Belarus's exports depend directly on neighboring countries such as Poland, Lithuania, and Latvia. This isolation threatens not only trade, but also the very economic survival of thousands of families. How can a worker plan for the future when every door around them is closing? The comparison with North Korea is no exaggeration. Alexander Lukashenko's regime seeks to control narratives, impose restrictions, and turn the country into an island in the middle of Europe. To an outside observer, this may sound distant, but think of the real impact. When supermarkets face price hikes due to sanctions, when essential medicines become scarce, or when companies are forced to lay off workers after losing access to foreign markets. According to the International Monetary Fund, the Belarusian economy contracted by about 5% in 2022 and remains on a negative trajectory in 2025, a direct reflection of this deepening isolation. And an inevitable question arises: how much longer will the population be willing to carry this burden? The regime insists on showcasing generosity, offering 30-day visa-free stays to foreign visitors, while at the same time allowing drones to be launched into Polish territory. This paradox is revealing. How can anyone trust a government that, with one hand, extends hospitality, while with the other, triggers provocations that raise the risk of conflict? The official narrative tries to persuade the world that Belarus is peaceful, that it is the neighbors who exaggerate. But the facts tell a harsher story. The closure of borders is not simply a temporary measure, it is a symptom of a country turning into something far darker. And what is most troubling is that, as Lukashenko distances himself from his European neighbors, his ties grow closer with authoritarian regimes such as Russia, Iran, and North Korea. Is the Belarusian people destined to live under a permanent state of siege? This is the pressing question we leave here, and if you want to understand just how far this isolation could go, make sure to subscribe to Tellnomics, like this video, and share it. Because what is happening today in Belarus could tomorrow redraw the entire balance of Europe. The border closure was not just a symbolic gesture by Poland. It was a strategic decision that immediately mobilized the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. The United Kingdom, Denmark, and France announced the deployment of soldiers, armored vehicles, and anti-drone defense systems. According to data released by NATO itself in August 2025, more than 8,000 additional troops were stationed along the eastern flank, reinforcing security in direct response to provocations from Minsk and Moscow. What once appeared to be a bilateral problem between Poland and Belarus has now escalated into a continental issue. But the inevitable question is this: are we witnessing merely a defensive maneuver or the prelude to something much larger? The historical memory is impossible to ignore. In February 2022, when Russia massed troops on Ukraine's borders, the Kremlin insisted these were nothing more than routine exercises. Many believed it. Days later, tanks crossed the border, and the largest European conflict since the Second World War erupted. Now, when Lukashenko assures that his moves are just training, who can possibly trust him? This type of historical repetition chills the spine. Soothing speeches followed by devastating attacks, and the cost of another miscalculation would be incalculable. According to the Kiel Institute for the World Economy, Western nations have already invested more than $280 billion in military and humanitarian support for Ukraine by September 2025. Imagine what it would mean to open a second front, with NATO directly entering into confrontation against Belarus and Russia. It would be a clash of unpredictable proportions, capable of reshaping the global balance. Are we truly prepared for this? Meanwhile, on the ground, life in the border regions has turned into a field of permanent tension. Local residents report drones flying over villages, constant patrols, and the lingering sense that any spark could ignite an irreversible explosion. It is the kind of atmosphere where rumors morph into fear, and fear into reckless action. Imagine walking up to a border sealed by concrete walls, barbed wire, and armed soldiers, and right beside it stands a duty-free shop. Open, yet completely useless. Shelves stocked with perfumes and liquor, but no one can buy them because no one can cross. This almost absurd scene is now the reality at the Belarus-Poland border. While the gates remain locked, customs officers and border guards continue to receive their salaries, paid with the taxes of a population that no longer has access to the other side. According to Belarus's Ministry of Finance, the 2024 budget allocated more than $1.2 billion to maintain border and customs structures. But for what if there is no traffic? This contrast between bureaucratic operation and real paralysis creates a surreal scenario. Institutions that exist merely to preserve the illusion of normality. It is as if Alexander Lukashenko's regime seeks to prove that the country still functions as before, while in practice it is living in isolation. And this isolation is not cheap. With less trade, less tourism, and fewer economic exchanges, the economy loses vitality. The European Bank for Reconstruction and Development estimated that in just 2023, the partial closure of borders reduced the flow of goods and services in the region by nearly 10%. Now imagine the impact of a total, indefinite blockade. But the most dangerous paradox lies in official propaganda. State television insists that Poland is preparing attacks, that enemies are gathering at Belarus's gates. To support this narrative, maps are broadcast, supposed invasion plans are displayed, all to keep alive the story of an encircled nation. But how far does this fantasy go? Is there truly an imminent external threat, or is this yet another theater designed to keep the population subdued and afraid? This psychological game creates daily micro-conflicts. On one side, ordinary citizens who no longer believe in state propaganda. On the other, those still convinced that the West is an enemy ready to strike. This clash of perceptions keeps society divided and paralyzed, while the regime buys time. But the question remains, how long can this staged performance last? At first glance, it may seem that Belarus is surrounded by allies, Russia, Iran, North Korea, and at times even China. But this impression collapses when we look at the numbers. In 2019, more than 50% of Belarusian exports went to the European Union, according to Eurostat. Today, that share has fallen dramatically, forcing Minsk to rely almost exclusively on Moscow. It is like trading a diverse network of partners for a single guarantor, and that guarantor is already in crisis. The International Monetary Fund estimates that Russia's economy will grow by less than 1% in 2025, strangled by sanctions and military expenses. How can a weakened ally sustain an entire country drifting deeper into isolation? This dilemma is reflected in everyday life. Companies that once exported agricultural products to Poland or Lithuania now struggle to sell in distant markets, paying more for transportation and earning less in return. Workers lose jobs, families see their incomes shrink. This is the reality of isolation, not just politics, but emptier plates and heavier bills. The United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization has warned that the average price of basic food items in Belarus has risen by more than 15% since 2022. The unavoidable question is, who pays this bill? Not the leaders, but the people. Meanwhile, close neighbors are tightening restrictions. Lithuania and Latvia have already limited crossings at strategic points, and all signs suggest this blockade will soon become total. The country is finding itself isolated not only economically, but also politically. And in the middle of this diplomatic solitude, internal propaganda insists everything is under control. But is it really? This is where the narrative gains force. The more Lukashenko leans on Moscow, the more he risks dragging his people toward the same fate of economic and political decay. A nation that once served as a bridge between East and West now edges dangerously close to becoming just a satellite, without its own voice. The contrast is stark. While neighboring countries join modern supply chains, attract investments, and connect to the world, Belarus seems to be moving backward in time, increasingly closed off and dependent. The question remains, how long can this be sustained? Did you know that in the year 2025, military drones from Belarus illegally crossed into Polish airspace? The incident was confirmed by Poland's Ministry of Defense in August, triggering an immediate alert within the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. This was no navigational error, but a deliberate provocation. Even Russia's own spokesperson, Maria Zakharova, admitted these flights were a direct response to the border closure. The scene is clear. While Belarus offers 30-day visa-free entry to tourists, it secretly launches drones into neighboring territory. What kind of government so openly plays both sides? These actions reveal the fragility of Alexander Lukashenko's regime. Unable to secure allies through diplomacy, he resorts to creating incidents that keep him in the headlines. But the risks are enormous. According to NATO, more than 300 aerial incidents were recorded on the eastern borders in just 2 years, between 2023 and 2024. Each one could have escalated into armed confrontation. The question is unavoidable. How long can this razor's edge hold without snapping? Meanwhile, the Belarusian population watches in disbelief. Many no longer accept the official line that Poland is preparing an invasion. They understand that the rhetoric of an external siege is nothing more than a disguise for the true internal prison. Yet others still cling to fear, convinced that enemies are poised to strike. This psychological divide within the people is one of the most effective weapons of authoritarian regimes. To control through uncertainty is cheaper than to control through force. And yet, each provocation pushes the country closer to a dangerous limit. NATO reinforcements continue to grow, exercises become more frequent, and the sense is that just one spark could transform tension into open war. Does Lukashenko truly believe he can confront forces far stronger than his own? Or is he merely gambling that his unpredictability will serve as a shield? These questions linger in the air as the border remains sealed and drones continue to cross the skies. But the echoing concern is simple and terrifying. Are we witnessing mere provocations or the first chapters of an inevitable conflict? What we see today in Belarus is not just the closing of a border, but the closing of a future. While Poland raises barriers and NATO reinforces its eastern flank, the truth is that Alexander Lukashenko's isolation was not imposed from outside in, but built from inside out. The country once called Europe's last dictatorship now dangerously edges toward an even more radical model, echoing the seclusion of North Korea. And the central question is, how long can this structure hold? The numbers reveal the severity. According to the World Bank, Belarus's gross domestic product shrank by around 4% in 2023, and projections for 2025 remain negative. The International Monetary Fund warns that sanctions, combined with near-total dependence on Russia, are eroding any chance of sustainable growth. Inflation already exceeds 12% annually, directly affecting the population, who pay more for food, energy, and medicine. Can a regime remain stable when daily life becomes a struggle for survival? At the same time, external provocations make clear that Lukashenko and Putin have chosen the path of confrontation. Drones, military exercises, and siege narratives create an illusion of strength, but in practice, they expose weakness. A regime that must invent enemies to justify its existence is already in crisis. And as history shows, such regimes rarely collapse from the outside, they are brought down from within. Here lies the central point. Neither the Poles, nor the Lithuanians, nor NATO can resolve Belarus's problem. The real power of change lies in the hands of the Belarusian people. Every protest, every raised voice, every act of resistance chips away at the machinery of fear sustaining the dictator. It is an unequal struggle, but not an impossible one. After all, how many dictatorships once seemed eternal, only to fall under the weight of popular pressure? If you have followed this story until now, it means you understand that it does not end at a closed border crossing. It continues in the streets, in markets, in families, and in the dreams of millions who want to live in a normal country, connected to the world and free from the weight of tyranny. So here is an invitation. Subscribe to Tellnomics, like this video, share it, and comment with your perspective. Because the more people know the truth about Belarus, the greater the pressure for change will be. Thank you for staying with us until the end. And remember, the future is always written by those who refuse to accept silence.